Hello and welcome to this episode of Global Reiki Webinars. We are talking tonight about the business of Reiki. I'm Rachel Goldberg and I'm here with Usui Shiki-ryoho Grandmaster Phyllis Furumoto. Please go ahead and type into the chat that you can hear me, and feel free to say hello and where you're joining us from. Phyllis, when you stepped out for a moment, I muted you, but I don't have the control to unmute you. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Oh, I see Ursula, Hans, and Selena, and all sentient beings saying hello. I believe the Ursula, Hans, and Selena are in Switzerland. Good to see you here, Ursula. Hello, Patricia in Michigan. I'm here in Chicago, and Elizabeth is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Well, and I'm assuming that means that my audio and visual are working because you guys heard me welcome you. But if someone could please type into the chat and confirm that, I'd really appreciate it. Hello, Susan in the Netherlands. Hello, Hugo, back of the yards in Chicago. I'm nearby. Joni in New York. And Ursula is saying that you can hear me. So fantastic. As I said, this is Global Reiki Webinars. It's an opportunity for members of the Global Reiki community, so those of us practicing Reiki of all forms and lineages all over the world, to come together and talk about topics facing the Reiki world. And what makes these really special is that we have responding to your questions, Usui Shiki-ryoho Grandmaster Phyllis Furumoto, who is the beautiful woman right next to me on your screen. So there are a couple of ways that you can get involved with the community other than viewing this webinar. One is to join our Facebook group, which is called Global Reiki Webinars. So if you are on Facebook, just type in Global Reiki Webinars and request to join the group. That's where you can ask your questions and have conversation about all things Reiki, as well as anything that you're inspired to talk about based on what you're seeing on this webinar. We have so many more people here now from Australia, Canada, Chile, and Orlando. I'm really happy to see you all, happy that we're here. So those of you who are with us live, if you have any issue with the video or audio pausing, I recommend that you refresh your web browser. Whichever way you see me pointing, your top left corner is usually where the refresh is, and that should fix it. And if not, you can log out and log back in. And the other thing is that shortly I'll be posting a link where you can click. It'll open in a different window, will not take you away from the webinar, and it's a link to a donation page for the Global Reiki Webinars PayPal account. Any financial contribution or gift that you'd like to offer to Phyllis and myself will help us to continue to pay for our softwares and other technological needs that we have, as well as sometimes compensate ourselves for the time and energy that we invest in creating this experience for the Global Reiki community. And we definitely appreciate all gifts that so many of you continue to send our way. Thank you. And if you're watching the replay on YouTube, the link will be right below in the description for you to check out. And again, we appreciate it. So without further ado, Phyllis, are there any other business announcements that I skipped?
No, not that I can think of now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to now mute myself and turn it over to Phyllis for the business of Reiki.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We'd like to start out, as usual, with a few minutes of Reiki treatment. So let's put our hands on ourselves and close our eyes and imagine that we're connecting with people from Michigan, from Chicago, Illinois, from Israel, from the Netherlands, from Australia, Chile, Brazil, parts of the United States, Canada. And I like going to my own favorite inner venue, I call it, a big meadow that I know of in Colorado, high up in the mountains. And there are mountains all around, and the sky is always blue. The sun is warm. And there's this huge circle of people with our arms all stretched out and are holding each other's hands. And I feel the connection of Reiki, both because I'm standing on the earth and I'm holding your hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Today, the topic is the business of Reiki. And this was suggested last year by one of our listeners and viewers. And we're really glad that we can bring this to you. I, of course, always like to look up the word in the dictionary, but now I don't go to the book. I go to Wikipedia because it's the coolest thing I like on the internet, especially for meanings. And it looks like, and what was really interesting is that this word comes from Old English and then Middle English, and it means exactly what it looks like in English. In English, the word busy, busy, just has an added, let's see, little suffix that it gets added on ness. So it's busyness or busyness, and the act of being busy with something. And the other way you could put it is being occupied or diligent with something or someone. And the concept of occupation came from this use of this word business. And that meant, what does one do for livelihood? And of course, this is our way of living, our way of actually having food and shelter and clothing and the other necessities of life. So when we look at the word occupation or business, we come to a word called vocation. And in the English language, vocation is different than occupation. Occupation is something that's much more about daily life and about how we live our life, and sometimes We do it because we have to, whatever that means. And there's another word, this word vocation, which is about how we choose to spend our lives. And usually that choice is because we are called to do something, like from our spirit or from our soul. We are called to something. And I feel like my vocation is Reiki. I was called to Reiki through a number of interesting circumstances. And I have never considered really stopping Reiki. Like sometimes when I get frustrated or I have been in a place where I feel like there's no way out, I think, oh, I'm going to stop doing Reiki. But of course, that's not really an option. So that's a vocation for me. And so when people say, oh, are you working? It's really difficult for me because...
Hey, Phyllis, something's happened with your microphone. Is something rubbing on it or it's moved from you?
No.
Okay.
Should I start again or?
No, it's better. You just got quiet and there was some feedback, but it's now improved.
Okay. So as we move to kind of earning our living or creating our livelihood through the practice of Reiki, then a lot of these questions come in. Can we earn our living through a vocation? And one of the things that I have always said to my students about this particular question is Reiki gives us what we need, not what we want. So Reiki probably won't buy you that Jaguar car that you would like to have in your garage, or give you a around the world cruise if that's what you'd like, but it will feed you, it will clothe you, and it will give you shelter in more ways than one. So about 20 years ago, a friend of mine, John Wallace, who's no longer with us, and I used to offer a workshop called The Business of You. And it was to people in Reiki who wanted to have a successful business, like either as a practitioner or as a Reiki master. And many of the issues that were involved in this workshop had to do with self-worth. For instance, one of the things that's very important in our business and having a business is that we take care of ourselves. So we make sure that we have enough money to put food on the table without any stress. That we have clothing that's suitable for our weather conditions, and that we have what we need to be able to live. And the other thing that is very important besides money is time. So one of the great exercises in this workshop was looking at time, like a round circle that represented a day, and looking at how we spend our day, and then how we would like to spend our day. And a lot of people, whether it was how we spent our day or would like to spend our day, didn't leave very much room for themselves. Maybe a half an hour for a Reiki treatment in the morning, but that was it. And John and I really advise people to add at least 1 hour a day, not your Reiki treatment time, that you have for yourself, that you can go for a bike ride or sit and just be by yourself or take a nap or whatever you need. So that's 1 hour a day. And in a circle representing a week, then we recommended a half a day. And in a circle representing a month, we really recommended 2 days, like we would say a weekend sometimes. But for Reiki masters, they usually teach during the weekend. So maybe a Monday and a Tuesday every month. So every day you get an hour. Every week you get a half a day, and every month you get 2 days in a row. And this was the most difficult thing for people. And I really encourage you, all of you who are on and all of you who will listen, to try to do these little exercises and find out how much you spend serving others, how much you spend for yourself, really for yourself, how much you spend, doing tasks of daily life, like grocery shopping and so on, and then sleep and so on. And it really is very telling, because we often don't make choices that really serve us. And then the next piece is about money. And of course, when we look at a business, we think, well, how do we figure out how much our Reiki treatment should be? And of course, this is a whole nother workshop about budgeting and expenses and so on. But what's important in this particular piece is, again, the time we spend for ourselves. So those of you who are looking at becoming a Reiki practitioner, it's the same thing with you. Like, how many treatments do you receive from somebody? So each week, we recommend that you receive at least one treatment from somebody else. For each month, you receive a series of 4 treatments, one each day for 4 days. And for every year, you receive a series of treatments. Can be 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, but somehow that you take out time to receive treatments yourself. And usually these are treatments that are paid for, that you pay for. And you would be surprised at how much difference this makes. So one of the secrets about the business of Reiki is that we are involved. It's not about giving and a one-way street of, the energy always going out. It's about creating cycles where we're taken care of at the same time as others are taken care of. And we know that when we practice Reiki and we give a Reiki treatment, that of course the energy comes through us, and that allows us to be nourished as well. But there's another piece of this when you're actually in business of Reiki, where you need to be able to be conscious about taking care of yourself. So that's my only piece of advice in this particular section, and it's a very important one. Excuse me. Sorry.
Okay. Shall we move into questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. So many of you had a chance to submit questions in advance. And those of you who are with us live also have the chat, and we'll do our best to monitor that. The first question that Phyllis would like to respond to that was submitted in advance came from Muriel, and she wrote, "First, let me thank you again for all of your work and sharings for the community. I wonder for a long time if we could talk about business or just simply service of Reiki. For me, the practice of Reiki is more a service, a sharing with heart than a business. Money and spiritual practice must be seen with a lot of judgments, i.e., we do not decide to make business only for money. Could you enlighten us regarding this point of view? Really, thanks for your answer. Love, light, and Reiki."
Great. See, perfect question, Muriel. I love these questions. You all just know exactly what to ask. So, Muriel, I one of the things that's really important for me about this concept of service is that um, there are kind of two different ways to look at service. One is um, to be able to serve freely without any attachment to reward. And that's something that a lot of us would like to be able to do. And when we think about somebody, of course, the kind of heroine of this kind of service is Mother Teresa, who looked like, in her work with India, that she didn't receive any reward. However, in the interviews and some of the things that I've read about her, what she was serving was not the individual that she was caring for. She was serving life. She wanted to serve life, and through that service, life served her. And that was her way of creating the cycle. For us, in our daily life here in the United States, in South America, in Russia, Japan, wherever we are, we live most of us live in a kind of society where we actually need money. And I'll tell you something, I personally can say now, I wouldn't have been able to 30 years ago, but I can say now that I've lived a life of service. I've served people. I've given up my time and energy at times when I could ill afford it. And I did it anyway, and I rested later. I have given of myself so that my home life I'm not home very much, and so on and so on. But that's because I want to serve, and I'm serving Reiki. And Reiki gives me what I need. I always have had, sometimes very, very at the last minute, but I've always been able to pay my house payments, to feed myself, to fix my car when it needs to be fixed, and so on. But I live fairly modestly. I like being comfortable, and if as I'm getting older now, if my income goes down and I'm not able to live in this house that I so dearly love in Green Valley, I can get smaller. I can give up some of my things. But it isn't because Reiki's abandoned me. It's just because Reiki's giving me what I need. And that lesson that I have in that moment of reducing, of what is it called, downsizing, um, is because that's what I need in that moment. That's my lesson. And I really believe that we service is not about being holier than thou. Service is being kind. And the first person that we have to be kind to is ourselves. So that's what we're doing in the beginning when we be sure that we have Reiki treatments, that we be sure that we have enough money to pay our rent, that we be sure that we can feed ourselves. That's kindness to us. So, true business, does not start out to make money. It starts out because somebody has a vision and somebody has passion, and it's to serve others. And they do it so well, with so much connection to the other person, that they're successful. And what has happened in our world today is that we have corporatized passion, and we have corporatized business. But that particular step separates the business owner from the people. So now, in the United States, we don't even have an occupation or a vocation on our census that says farming, because farming has become totally corporatized. And it's only the organic farmers who still meet the people in the marketplaces, every Wednesday at 5 o'clock in San Luis Obispo, and meet the people, and they sell directly to the people who eat the food. And this is true business. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Pavel about if you could describe the connection between Reiki and money, but I'm fairly certain we have another question on our agenda about that. Is that right?
Very close. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to thank you, Pavel, for submitting your question. I'm going to go, we'll get to it. And now I'm going to go to Tony's question, which was, what if you are called with an understanding that it is in all of us and that it was not meant to be for profit? It is one thing to receive gifts for what you do freely by those you help, but to charge when you clearly understand that one is to teach what was freely given and wrongfully taken away. How would you advise someone to make it a business? Thank you, Tony.
I want to go back, Tony, to this definition of business, which is about being occupied with something. And, I understand that this is probably about teaching Reiki. And when you're a Reiki master and you teach Reiki, you're very busy with Reiki. And profit is another interesting word. I want you to know that unless you're charging something like $1,500 a student for first degree, you're not making a profit. There's just no way, because what I teach in first degree for the hours that I teach and what my preparation time is to come there is much more than $150 a student. That particular amount of money is not based on a business expense sheet. It's based on something that I was handed from my grandmother, and this has proven to be, for me still, even today, an appropriate amount for a commitment from the student to practice. And I believe that the combination of the time that's spent in the class, the amount of money that I ask, and the commitment to practice, because without the student practicing, the value of what they receive in first degree isn't nourished. So between the three of those, that is what the student gives as a commitment to become a student of Reiki. So it depends. Like, this is what I gave to receive Reiki, not at the time because I was taught by my grandmother as a young child, but eventually, this was asked of me when I became a master. And maybe in your practice, you received Reiki for a donation or for free. And then if that's true, and this is how you really feel in your heart, you want to share Reiki, then you'll need to have something else that impinges on this busyness, um, so that you can feed yourself and clothe yourself. So I think that this is a really tricky question on some level because I don't have enough information. But on the other hand, I one of my sort of basic things is practice how you were taught, and Reiki will give you what you need. So maybe somebody comes by and says, "Oh, I need you to do this, and I will pay you this amount of money for it." Then maybe that's Reiki bringing you money, and you can teach Reiki for free. I think that it's not my practice. It's not my understanding of how we human beings have relationship with money, but I really honor your practice, and I honor the practice that you are trying to hold as a master. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. The next question came from Todd, who I believe is with us live. Todd wrote, in the business of Reiki, has the proliferation of denominations of how Reiki is taught and practiced been exacerbated by having to market one's business to appear different, better, newer, etc.? Really good question, Todd. Thank you.
Yes, this was a little bit of a head breaker for me. So I just have to translate it into my own language, if that's okay. So, so what I think you're asking, Todd, is that there has been an explosion of different forms and practices of Reiki. Has this been affected by needing to have something different, something better, something newer? I think that's what you're asking. That I don't know about, in truth. I can't answer that question. I do know that when I started teaching, there was one practice, and that was the practice that Hawaii Takata brought to us and to all the masters that she initiated. And out of this time, very shortly afterwards, masters began to change the practice, sometimes very, very subtly and in really small details, and other times in really large, like changing the number of initiations or changing the time spent between initiations or not charging money, initiating people for free and so on. So these were larger ones. And what I realized, and this was after I went through a period of time of being very defensive about people changing the practice and feeling hurt and upset that they would dishonor what they were taught. But what I realized is that as human beings, we have to make something our own. We have to put our stamp of individuality on it. And in Reiki, one of the things that a lot of us did not realize how deep this went is that we were students. Even when we were masters, we were students. And that Reiki, the practice of Reiki, would bring us very tough life lessons, things that we had to consider, things that we had to learn about money, for instance. And, you know, I have experienced teaching Reiki for free, not because I intended to do that, but because somebody's check bounced and they never paid the check, or I taught Reiki and had people pay in increments, you know, like $10 a month or something, and they never paid me after the first $10, or or sometimes I felt like somebody had contributed to a community or had the potential to contribute to community. And so I gave them the initiations for free. And it didn't really work for me in some sense, because these students never practiced, they never came back, and they never, as far as I know, they never honored the practice. That was just something that they did and they didn't have commitment to. Um, Now that was in those days, in the 1980s and 90s. When I think about people now trying to differentiate their practice from others, and not understanding that the difference has to do with the former practice, then I think that your question has more relevance and maybe brings us to somebody saying, well, how could I be different? How could I make this appear better, faster, newer, whatever? And that's totally possible. And one of the things that I want to just say here is that as we were taught Reiki, that for me, that particular method of teaching goes to us and hopefully creates a kind of sacred package in which we hold it and we continue teaching that package so that that practice remains alive. And it takes a lot of discipline, because it's really easy to change it either unconsciously or consciously. And I feel that one of the things that will strengthen our Reiki community is when we discover that it's not about competition. Like, I don't feel I don't feel threatened by other forms of practice. Those people who go to somebody who teaches first, second degree in one weekend, they would never come to me for Reiki. I don't feel that need in them. And that's true for all the other different forms of Reiki. And I'm happy with my form. And I want to be able to be a still point for the students that I have and for the practitioners that come out of this form. And so I like it when I go to buy a car and there are 10 different car dealers along the road, because I get to just walk from one to another and compare and find out what fits my need. And that's how I ended up with the Ford. After all these years of saying, I will never buy an American car. So, you know, we have to look for what we need. And in Reiki, the good news is there's a form of Reiki out there for everyone.
Thanks, Phyllis. We did have a question in the chat from Irina. We've got a chat from Irina coming next. So Irina, your advanced question we'll be getting to right after Lori's. And I can read what you wrote in the chat then too. Lori's question is, how does one transition from offering Reiki to charging when several treatments would be beneficial? Thanks, Lori.
Well, this is tough. And if I think, Lori, what you're asking is this. So sometimes I've said to somebody, oh, I meet or something, and I say, oh, maybe you'd like to have a Reiki treatment. I can give you a Reiki treatment. And they have a Reiki treatment. And then they have another one. And then they say, well, I'm really gaining a lot of benefit from these treatments. I'd like to have 10 of them. And then I say, well, if you want to have 10 of them, then we need to switch to a more professional, a more practical arrangement for your treatments, and that is now I'm treating you as a public practitioner of Reiki. This isn't about friendship. And we're going to need to work out an exchange for those treatments. And it's a little awkward, but if you're clear about the role that you're playing in that person's life, then you understand the opportunity you are giving them. So if you were, being a friend and practicing the folk art of Reiki, which is, if you want to give somebody a treatment, like, well, in a loose way of speaking, for fun, and they gain benefit and they realize that they have some operation coming up and they want to have a number of treatments to prepare for that, then you're moving from that folk art to a public practice. And then that's where receiving money for your treatments comes in. And it's important because you reserve that time for them, they reserve the time for Reiki, and it puts you both in a committed place. And that's very important. So I hope this answers your question.
Great. So, thank you, Phyllis. Our question from Arena. Phyllis, would you like me to just read both her advanced question and the one in the chat back to back?
No, I need to do one or the other. One and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question that Irina submitted in advance says, can you comment on the role of money in Reiki as a business? So this was also Pavel's question. As far as I feel in material business affairs, money takes a substantial role to decide if a business can remain in life or not. How about spiritual business and your vision of money as a gift in Reiki? Thank you.
Again, I have to translate this question a little bit. So I'll just take first the role of money in Reiki as a business. So, if I lived in British Columbia, way up in the mountains, and I was in a community where there wasn't a lot of cash money, but there was a lot of exchange, then I would be giving Reiki treatments for chickens, for casseroles, for shoveling snow off of my car in the winter, and so on. I mean, we're not talking that it has to be money, but exchange is really important in the sense that it isn't about a kind of business deal. It's a kind of energy exchange, like literally. So I'm taking this time and this willingness to be with you in a Reiki treatment, and and that's a gift. And the person receiving that treatment is gifting something back to me, money usually. And we call that exchange paying for. But because our social way of translating paying for, we end up with this kind of yucky feeling about that. So imagine that I'm gifting Reiki and they're gifting something back to you. It allows the cycle of exchange to continue. That cycle is very important for both of you to remain and nourish your own human dignity, and to be sure that both of you are equally committed to whatever the outcome is that Reiki gives us. Have I, in my life, been a successful business person? Well, I don't know. I haven't ended up my life with a big bank account or a paid for house, or if I had children, I wouldn't leave anything to them because I don't have anything except for debts. But I've lived an incredibly rich life. And I've lived a life that I would never trade in. So, as they say in Europe sometimes, do you run your business in the black? Well, no, I don't. I run my business on this thin edge between black and red. Sometimes it's black, sometimes it's red, sometimes it's right on the line. And that's what I mean when I say that Reiki gives you what you need, not what you want. Thank you.
Thank you. And what Irina wrote today is, Dear Phyllis, can I ask you about the sum for initiation for Reiki 1? In more than one written record, I have read about Hawaii Takata asking for 125 American dollars. Could you comment on the change of the sum to $150? Thank you.
Sure. My grandmother actually charged many different sums of money, all around $120. And after her death, the Reiki Alliance Masters got together and we discussed it, and we decided to take the amount $150. So that was, for this practice, what we decided. And now some masters don't like this because they think it's not enough. I personally, it works for me. I'm never going to make a profit, remember, on first degree. If I had, even back then, I would have to charge $1,000 or something. So, this is about service. And I'm serving the student, and I feel like the $150 still serves to measure a kind of commitment that they have for the practice. So it's, receiving the money for first degree classes or second degree classes is about receiving it for the system from the student. It's not about me making money.
Thanks. Our next question that came in advance was from Tim. And he wrote, is giving free attunements devaluing the attunement itself? How much should I charge for levels 1, 2, and 3? What are the best ways to make money with Reiki? If I am genuinely gifted a new level, form, or type of Reiki by spirit or a loving being of light, what are the implications in starting and patenting a new level, form, or type of Reiki? Thank you. Immense gratitude for providing the opportunity to ask these questions. I look forward to the webinar.
Great. Again, I have to go back and say that if you practice the way that you were taught Reiki, then the question of devaluation isn't relevant. It is not relevant. Because for me, as a master, it is our responsibility to remain loyal to the practice that was given to us. Now, if that's not something that you can do, which I totally understand, you want to make Reiki your own, and you create, however you do it, uh, a new system because this is what you think is the best expression of who you are and gives the best to your students, then well, that's what you have to try. That's what you have to do because it comes hopefully authentically from you. And personally, my attitude is, and my opinion is that although I didn't like the way that Reiki was given to me because I didn't have my choice and a lot of other personality issues, around it. But this practice has given me so many gifts in my life, has allowed my life to be transformed over and over again, has given me the richness that I could never imagine and would never have if I had multi-million dollars. I mean, I have richness that no money can buy, literally. And there were times when I was envious of people who got into a profession or something and ended up, being able to go on a world tour for a year and just, live anywhere they wanted to. But I can't do that. But, I've taken a world tour. I haven't been to every country, but I've met Reiki students in so many different countries and we've shared Reiki together. And it's touching. So, why would I want to pass on anything less or anything different than the practice that I received? And this, for me, is the question that I feel like you need to ask yourself first. Thanks.
So I think, thank you, Phyllis. I think Igul, your questions may have been answered by what Phyllis just shared. And Marie, who's present in the chat, wrote, if Bill Gates wanted me to teach him Reiki, do I charge him $150 when that is like a nickel to him? And it makes me wonder, Phyllis, do you remember, I think it was the webinar we did, there's one if you search in YouTube called The Role of Money in Reiki, where Phyllis did a teaching on the relative world and the absolute world. And Marie, I believe if you look that up, either in Google or YouTube, The Role of Money in Reiki, a part 1. There's also a part 2 that you'll find a lot of insight on that. And Phyllis, I don't know if you'd like to say any more right now.
Well, if Bill Gates came to me and wanted to become a Reiki student, he is a human being. He's like everybody else. I don't ask him anything differently. And that's how I honor him as a human being. I don't care how much money he has. I don't care what kind of house he lives in. I don't care if he even has a house to live in. The same is true for a person. I mean, it's the same question for a person who lives on the street, and like there was this master who came to me and she said, I can't teach this woman who sells lemons on the streets of Mexico for a living, second degree, because she's illiterate. She can't sign her name. And I said, well, what the hell does that have to do with second degree Reiki? Hello? She's smart enough to earn enough money to get, to save up the money to give you for second degree. Like, hello, like, I don't care whether she can sign her name or not. Like, this is our filters that get in the way of us being available to humanity. And it's very important to consider. Thank you. Great. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, so the next question was from Sharon. And she said, how important do you consider it to make time to explore self-help strategies after healing?
Again, I will take some liberty of translating this. I assume that when you say after healing, that means after Reiki treatment. Would you say that's true, Rachel?
I think that's what she means.
Yeah.
That's how I read it.
For me, how important do you? For me, Reiki gives me everything I need. It's kind of going to be a saying you won't get sick of hearing me say it today, maybe. And if there is something that is needed after the treatments, I believe Reiki will bring it to you. You know, like sitting down with somebody for a cup of tea and saying, "Oh, can I sit at your table?" And the person, you know, happens to do readings or happens to be a Gestalt therapist or whatever, and you end up doing a session with them. I mean, I feel like one of the things that is important for all of us to realize is that Reiki brings us what we need, and our needs are individual. So we can't really make a rule for what we do. We can have options for our people that we treat, but one person can come and get 4 Reiki treatments and that's it for the rest of their lives, and their life is transformed. And for other people, they need to become a student of Reiki and to practice for 40 years. So, you know, it just really depends. Yeah, thank you.
The next question came from Joni, who wrote, here's what I've learned over the last 15 years of my Reiki business. Growing your business involves growing as a Reiki practitioner and as a person. If not, then all you have worked towards was not cohesive and compassionate from the start. Do you agree?
Oh. I do agree that growing your business, in other words, being available to people for treatments and for classes and so on, involves growing as a Reiki practitioner, because you're going to be confronted with all kinds of situations that you don't want to deal with, and you're going to have to deal with them anyway. And when you do that, you actually grow as a person, because you can't help it. Reiki brings you situations and people to confront the places in yourself that you don't want to see, that you don't want to deal with, or that you have distorted beliefs about, so distorted that it changes how you live your life. And that's a kind of healing. And I can't understand, and I don't think I can relate to, if not, then all you have worked toward was not cohesive and compassionate. I don't see how we can even judge that, or because if you have embarked on a Reiki business for 15 years, you probably, at the time you started, didn't know what cohesive was, and you probably were working on compassion. And so I believe that Reiki just gives us what we need, again, this phrase, and that's what I believe and what I agree with. So yes to the first part of your question, and I don't know. Maybe, probably not for the second part. Thanks.
Great. Our next question is from Denise. How should Reiki be advertised? What are the hurdles to overcome?
Well, you can try to advertise Reiki. In my experience, it doesn't work, in the sense that when we give a Reiki treatment, Reiki gives a person what they need. And for some people, it's comfort. For some people, it's pain relief. For some people, it's a good sleep. For another person, it closes their wound after surgery. I mean, it's a very strange thing about advertising. And even though my grandmother used to say, no advertising with Reiki, what I've come to learn is that it's not just really about don't advertise because it's a rule or because it's dishonorable. It's like, how could you advertise Reiki at all? Now, advertising for me is very different than allowing people to know that you're available. So allowing people to know that you're available, having a website, people understanding what your service is that you're offering, and so on, that's something that is, of course, very important to do. And what's really interesting question in the business of Reiki is, what are we actually offering people? What is the service that we provide? And I've had lots of seminars around this, and there is no pat answer yet. Thanks.
Our next question came from Kate, who wrote, is it possible to make a living just through Reiki, or do I need to have another job?
It really depends on you. If you're willing to surrender and, if I can say, throw yourself and surrender into Reiki and do what Reiki brings you and live on what Reiki brings you, then yes, you can make a living through Reiki. A lot of people today can't do that. They can't surrender to Reiki. And one of the things that was important for me when I initiate Reiki Masters is that I say to them, if you can do this, excuse me, if you can really let go into Reiki, then and follow the path, then Reiki will support you. But a lot of them can't do it, and it's a process. So this is your question for you. Thank you.
Our next question is from Anamika. And Anamika wrote, in daily life, I can say that I'm quite into business. I have my own company and I'm doing pretty well in terms of making my own money. For some reason, something in my mind says that I can't make money out of Reiki. The money in Reiki is more like an exchange, but not for a living. That is hardly or even not possible. Although I know this is an assumption, I still give more attention to my business work than my Reiki work because of this assumption. It's the fear of ending up without or with not enough money that nurtures my behavior. I'm aware of it, but also not yet capable of changing it, which is pretty frustrating sometimes as well. Maybe I have to change my perspective about how much money one needs for a living. Will Reiki take care of it, or shall I try to find a way to mix my business life with Reiki, let them come together? I'm happy with the topic of this webinar and hope to come to a more balanced view. Thank you so much for offering this opportunity. The timing is amazingly perfect in my life right now.
Great. What a wonderful story. Thank you, Anamika, for submitting this. This is so beautiful. It's like Kate's question, but from another perspective. We also, in our decision-making process, have to take into consideration what our life is like. Like, do we have a family to support? What is it that is our commitment to ourselves? Excuse me. So, Anamika, my advice to you is to stay where you are, receive Reiki treatments, and if you can, I don't know if you're a first degree or second degree student or a master. If you can, send and you have second degree, then I would send Reiki to yourself and imagine yourself only doing your business or only doing Reiki, and then if you can hold both of them in your hand, what would that look like? What would that feel like? What would that be like for you? And really go inside. I mean, you have the tools to be able to work through this. And don't set a time for this. It may be that what Reiki is doing is saying, this is your business now. You know, do your business, be successful. And when you have reached a certain place in having your business, then you'll be able to let it go without any regret and go to Reiki. And this is what happens. We have parts of our lives where we really need to live another part of who we are. And sometimes that means a part of our business person. So it's a process. Just keep that in mind. Thanks.
That's a part. Yes.
Rachel, I need to just go get some more water. So I'm going to mute myself and go get water, and I'll be right back.
Okay. So I'm just making a note to myself that we're an hour and 8 minutes in, because what Phyllis just said is definitely something that I'd like to re-listen to. And I see that Aigul is saying that Anamika's question resonates deeply with them, and with me too. All of these questions are really relevant and resonant for me, and many of the things that I'm currently dealing with in life. So I appreciate your questions too, and for each of you giving me the opportunity to hear Phyllis's response to them. And now that she's back, I'll read our next question. That is from Dina, and Dina wrote, There is an idea that new generation prefers buying experiences more than things. Would you present Reiki treatment or Reiki workshop as an experience to this market, millennials? Or is it disrespectful, as there is more to Reiki than experience? Thanks, Tina.
Well, I have been thinking about this, Dina, and you know, one of the things that I feel is such a blessing about our Reiki practice is that everything I've learned through my own experience. Now, that's kind of the good news and the bad news. So, I feel like I have to have the experience in order to live it, in order to gain my own perspective, in order to live my own lesson about it. And, you know, I see Rachel going through, for instance, you know, something in her life, and I think, oh, if I could like integrate that into my life, that would be really great. But I can't because I haven't lived the experience. So, you know, somebody could have, well, my grandmother, Hawaii Takata, told me there's such a thing as Reiki, universal life energy. And I'm giving you the opportunity to practice Reiki and channel this energy. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And I just thought she was making it up. And, you know, until I had my own experience of the energy, until I had my own experience of what it could do for my own life, it meant nothing. Really. It didn't matter if it was my grandmother or who she was or how many years of experience she had or anything. So maybe the millennials will really like Reiki because of that. I have no idea. But it doesn't really matter because whatever the case, I'm not changing Reiki or the way that I present it, and there's no way that I can. Thanks.
The next question is from Valerie, who wrote, how do you describe Reiki and its benefits to potential clients?
This is such a difficult question. It's probably the most difficult question ever asked. And I think we all have our own strategy of how to do this. I usually keep it quite simple, and I end it by saying, and I can't really explain to you the benefit for you, but if you allow me to give you a treatment, then you will understand the benefit for yourself. Because there's no way that I can tell people what the benefit will be. Like I have lots of friends who don't have Reiki, and sometimes I see that in my own life experience, if I could give them a few Reiki treatments, I think it would really be helpful. But that's my life, and that's me who's really dedicated to Reiki and really willing to change. And maybe they aren't. So I can't tell people what the benefit will be for them because that would be like almost diagnosing or predicting, you know, what Reiki will do for people, and it's really a bad idea. So, good luck.
We have Jeannie wrote a question that says, as a Reiki master, I have a small public practice. My main activity is giving first and second degree classes and supporting students. With also a little pension, I can make a living with it, so it can have my full dedication. Sometimes people come for treatments, but never for daily treatments for a longer period of time. And sometimes I think people need it to really make a difference when there are chronic conditions. But people cannot afford it when I ask my normal price, but that is not my problem, cannot make time. When I read Helen Haberle's Hawaii Takata's story and read how not seldom she treated people for months on a daily basis and achieved such wonderful results, I really long to be able to do the same, and I wonder how she could do that. Did she ask money? Can you tell something about how she managed to offer this? I know she often advised family to take first-degree class. Great. But not everybody has family who can help. My English is not good enough to feel the difference between serving or being of service, but I am really searching for a way to offer in my public practice a long-term treatment, not for my own benefit, do not need it, but to be able to offer daily treatments for deep healing when people want to go that path. I know I have to walk my path, but when you can tell me something about how this was part of Takata Sensei's practice, I would be grateful. Thank you in advance.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I feel that Hawaii Takata surrendered herself to Reiki. So she always had time for treatments. And I don't really understand this part about your not having the time. And if that's an issue for you, then one of the things that is really interesting for me is how we imagine having a Reiki practice. So when you're in a folk art kind of practice, you do it when it's available and when you're available, so to speak. But when you're in a public practice and you really want to offer people Reiki treatments, then you need to make that commitment to be available for like 6 months for daily treatments. And it's a commitment. And that commitment needs to have an exchange. And that exchange usually comes in the form of money because that's what's universally used to buy food or rent or whatever. You know, it's kind of multi-use exchange. So, of course, Hawaii Takata asked money. I mean, for her, there was never a question about whether Reiki would make a difference. It was always so. It would make a difference. And she would say to people, okay, if you're willing to come and have a treatment every day for 4 months, I'll start tomorrow. And they would say, well, I don't know if I can afford it or I can't. And she would say, come back when you're ready for your health to be your priority. Period. No explanations, no bargaining, no nothing. Come back when your health is your priority. You know, we have a priority of having an automobile. You know, sell your car for the money for Reiki. If you're dead or you can't get out of bed, then you don't need a car. That's what you would say, because if you're healthy, you can always buy another car. Or she would say, do you smoke? Stop smoking. Do you go out to eat? Stop buying food in restaurants. Eat very simply. Don't turn your heat on. Wear more jackets. I mean, whatever you need to receive the money so that you can have Reiki treatment. And she wasn't not compassionate. She was so compassionate that she forced people to make themselves a priority. This was her first big lesson to them. It wasn't about, earning the money. It was about them committing to the time. And that's an amazing gift. And, when I think about myself, for instance, and I know that my health would be so much better if I walked every day for a half an hour. I mean, that just seems like a nothing thing, right? It doesn't cost me any money. It only costs me time, which for me is a really big deal. But more than time, it costs me the effort of putting on my walking shoes, going out the door, and spending a half an hour on myself to walk. I can't do it. I mean, I'm ready to get hypnotherapy because I'm desperate. And I've tried Reiki. I even have so much resistance that Reiki doesn't help. So, you need to not say, this is not for my own benefit. This is for your benefit. Because if you were willing to make the commitment to be the treater, to be the practitioner to whom people could come for Reiki every day, those treatments that you give every day will change you as well. That's your benefit. And it will also benefit you because you will receive an exchange. It has to be a two-way street. The benefit has to be both ways, both for you and for the person that you're treating or teaching. And if it's not a benefit, then it's not your vocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I believe it's two more questions. We have a question from Svetlana, who wrote, how do I start my Reiki business here? Now that I live in New York. I came from Russia 2 years ago and have internal resistance about the business of Reiki.
Well, Svetlana, I don't know your circumstance, but I hope when you listen to this webinar that this question has been answered. It takes right timing. It takes for you to be prepared, and it takes an opportunity for you to have a space in which you can offer Reiki and just go for it. Yeah.
The final question that was submitted in advance. If you've submitted a question less than 24 hours before the webinar, I'll get those to Phyllis after, and I imagine she'll have some time to answer them in the Facebook group. But the last question that came in at least 24 hours before the webinar came from Eileen, and she wrote, attracting clients and business insurance. Period.
Eileen, I have some idea of what you mean, and I'm going to answer it very quickly. And that is that attracting clients is about how much you live Reiki. And there's no sell in Reiki because Reiki is energetic. So you're not going to convince people to come have Reiki treatments because you can guarantee them something, because you can't. It's unpredictable. So the way that you attract clients is how much you live Reiki. And your business insurance, it's good to have liability insurance. So if somebody falls off your Reiki table and injures themselves, and they want to sue you, you have insurance. But you don't really need it. And if you do need it, you should get out of the business. Thanks.
Thank you. So yeah.
I just have one question I'd really love to answer from the chat.
Yeah.
So, how often does Phyllis get a Reiki treatment? And do you go to the same practitioner? And how much does each treatment cost? So, I have, when I'm at home, I have from 3 to 5 treatments a week, hands on. I have a lot of treatments that come in from second degree students. And I am lucky because they want to support me in doing my work. So I'm I'm very happy about this. When I go out on the road, I get a treatment from people, and if I make an appointment for a treatment, I pay whatever the person asks. Sometimes it's $35, sometimes it's $120. It just depends. Um, and because of my condition and where I am, then I do a lot of Reiki exchanges, but they're not like somebody gives me a treatment and then I give them a treatment. It's like, uh, for instance, this one man, this so sweet, the last year, he just wanted to give me Reiki treatments because he had had so much from Reiki that he wanted to be able to thank me. And so I had to accept that as his gift. And last night was his 70th birthday. And I made lasagna from scratch because that was his favorite food. And that was my exchange for him. And he was really touched by it. So, I would love to have a Reiki practitioner here that I could call up and say, I want an appointment every Monday and Thursday from you at this time, but I don't have one for you. And I don't, I everywhere I travel, there's nobody like that. So, this is part of my passion about people becoming public practitioners of Reiki so that I can travel and get as many treatments as I want. Okay. Thank you.
I find it really surprising that that's not available at this point in time.
It's not very available, no.
Well, I also have questions that I pulled from the live chat from Catherine, Joni, and Hugo. And I will send those to Phyllis right after the webinar. Joni says, I'll treat you when you come to Long Island. And Terry says, come to Birmingham, Alabama. It's available here. Great to know.
Good.
And before we close with a little bit of Reiki, I want to say thank you and express gratitude from myself to all of the people who sent donations to the Global Reiki Webinar Project, to Phyllis and myself during this program. And for those of you who are watching YouTube, you can do that by going to PayPal and sending a gift to reikiwebinars@gmail.com or looking for a link in the video description below the video. Phyllis, before we close with Reiki, is there anything else you'd like to say? No? All right. So just as we did in the beginning, go ahead and put hands on yourself, or if it's in your practice to send distance Reiki, I invite you to send Reiki to our collective highest purpose. Hmm. Hmm. Feel free to allow the Reiki to run through you and to you for as long as it goes. And um, until we're together next time, peace, love, and Reiki. Bye. Thanks.